So, as you know, I have met David Lynch. I met him in Inland Empire. Uh, I met him at the screening of Inland Empire in Dallas. My first wife got press passes. She was Sicilian and went to ABS, which was American Broadcast School in Arlington. And her friend who worked on the radio got the press passes. So we went in as press, and we were not press at all. But we went to Inland Empire. We sat down, and I got to talk to him about script writing. And everyone that I've met that has heard about him said that he was very, just kind of a normal guy, not real strange or anything like that at all. But I completely disagree. I think he was the most strange person that I have ever met in my entire life. That could function in society, as he functions as a storyteller and painter and filmmaker. But by far, he was by far the strangest person that I've ever met. And mostly because he did this thing with his hand that was almost as if his hand was kind of moving on its, almost like if you think of a drummer, how a drummer can drum two beats at the same time. You've got one beat going on, and then you got another beat. And that's what his hand did. It was almost as if his hand was moving on its own, and then it would do this. And because I studied acting for 20 years or more, and gesturing is, something that all actors pay attention to with people. Marlon Brando did the whole gesturing of, in The Godfather, and it would do this gesturing, but it still kind of made sense. It flowed. With Lynch, it didn't. It was like it was almost like it was a performance or something, and then his hand, to me, when I saw him, and I said, I got the microphone and I said, "Hello, Mr. Lynch," or something like that, and I said, I wanted to ask you, because we had just watched Inland Empire. So let me tell you, before I go to the question that I asked him, let me tell you how the night went through. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the west side of Dallas, at a place called the Magnolia Theater or something. I always say that. I don't know for sure if it was the Magnolia Theater, but I sometimes am wrong about places and locations. I'm horrible at times with naming things, but at other times I'm great. But I want to say it was like the Magnolia Theater. All I know is I think there was a taco diner that was across the way that's no longer there, and it was a theater. So it was a movie house theater, and they were doing the USA Film Festival, and they were bringing in Inland Empire. Now, I went back through Google and tried to find this moment, and I cannot find it online. It happened. But he did go through Inland Empire at the Texas Theater, where Lee Harvey Oswald went in before he got busted for killing John F. Kennedy. Not David Lynch, but Lee Harvey Oswald. There was a place called the Texas Theater, which I think they brought Inland Empire. This was not the Texas Theater. We were not at the Texas Theater. I would have known. We were not there. We were at another theater called like the Magnolia or something. But it was a theater. I cannot find it when I Google it, meaning in the archives. But it was there. He traveled through the first time Inland Empire had come to Dallas. Now, he had an after party at the W, which is a hotel, which we did not see him at the after party, but we did see him right after, I believe it was after the showing of Inland Empire. Now, there was a guitar player who was an electric let me go back. There was a guitar player who was an electric guitar player. So he played electric guitar. It wasn't David Lynch, but it was an electric guitar player who came out and played the electric guitar. Then when he was done, he left, and David Lynch came in and sat down. It was very ceremonial, okay? They showed the movie, and we sat there. very loud speakers, lots of just imagery. It was pretty much it was probably when it came to watching a movie, it was probably the closest to having like a dream, that I was watching this person like this, as if this person was showing me their dream, and we were just kind of watching it and all this music and all this stuff. And Laura Dern, of course, was in the movie. I don't think she was there, but she was in the movie, and all these things were going on. And so then the movie ended. The electric guitar player came out. He played a riff. Then he left, and then David Lynch came out before the audience. We were only a few feet away from him because we were in box seats, close up to the screen. I remember looking up at the screen. And then David Lynch sat down, and then they brought up the house lights, not fully, but pretty bright. And then I think they had light on him. Maybe there was someone around, but eventually they passed around a microphone. And I, never thought in a million years that particular night that I would actually be able to talk to David Lynch. I didn't plan it. My wife, who was with me, did not plan it. I mean, she did get the tickets and asked me to go with her, and we planned that. But we never had any clue in a million years that we were going to be able to speak. And my wife at the time was a big-time Twin Peaks fan, loved David Lynch's stuff. And then I think my parents were on my stepdad's side, or my mom, and then they're kind of fans of it. My stepdad's a big fan. So there were people that we knew that were big fans. And I, of course, I liked David Lynch. I thought Blue Velvet was a good movie. I wasn't as big a fan as I am now the years have gone by. And plus the sequel of Twin Peaks had come out. This, I guess you call it Twin Peaks Return or whatever, that came out on Showtime. I thought it was one of the best masterpieces that I've ever seen. And also, I'm a big fan of Mulholland Drive, but I don't talk about Mulholland Drive a lot, but I'm a big fan of, I saw it in New York with a playwright lady that I knew, and we were big fans of Mulholland Drive and things like this. But this was after all that, and then finally Inland Empire came out of nowhere, and here we are, and then he's sitting there. And there was a few questions. I don't remember any of the questions. I don't remember any of the responses. I don't remember any of the conversations that were told. He spoke for quite a bit of time. But I do finally remember the microphone was passed to me. Either I asked for it or someone put it in my hands, or I think you could ask for the microphone. So I stood up and I said, I remember before the question, I had just finished watching Inland Empire. And in my mind, I thought the whole thing was improv, the whole movie. It seemed to me that this whole movie was made up as he went, and he just kind of directed it, and it seemed like it was thrown together that way. So in my heart of hearts, I thought this whole movie was improv. It was an improvisation from the very beginning to the end, and I thought it was, this incredible, strange, surreal experience that he wanted to reveal. It was very different from his other movies, and it's very different. So, before I proposed the question, before I announced the question, before I began to speak and ask the question, in my mind it was improv. So I said, hi, David Lynch, I'm Cole. My question is, I don't know for sure if I said, is Inland Empire improvised, but I said, how much is your stuff improvised, and was Inland Empire improvised, or how much of your stuff was improvised? And he just very much, kind of waited, and the room kind of got quiet, and it was almost like I had completely insulted him or something. Or it felt strange in the air. Like the question I answered was, the wrong question, And he immediately, his hand kind of came up, and he said, well, Cole? And he said my name, which scared me because I didn't really remember saying my name, but I did say my name, I think. But he said my name. He said, Cole? Everything is scripted. That's what he said. And I was like, I almost wanted to continue speaking, saying, "You mean you wrote a script to this?" Is what I was gonna say to Inland Empire, but I bit my tongue and didn't say that. I realized that the entire movie of Inland Empire was actually scripted, and he had written it, which to me it was unfathomable. It was like, how could possibly anybody write something like this? I didn't say that though, but he did. Now, of course, when I asked the question, how much is your stuff improvised, I was meaning everything: Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, and you can kind of tell Twin Peaks is scripted. But what he wanted me to know, which was important, was everything was scripted. From Eraserhead all the way to Inland Empire, it was all scripted. And then he reiterated it was important. It was important that he was speaking with importance, saying that everything we do is scripted, and that all of it was planned. Like all of Eraserhead was scripted. Now I went back later and I read Eraserhead, or I read parts of Eraserhead, and I can see that it's clearly scripted. And then I think of like Wild at Heart, that looks like it's possibly maybe scripted. But anyway, I'm realizing that what he was saying was like everything, he sat down and wrote this out first. Then he proceeded to make the film, He said somewhere in there, though, he said every once in a while, in a blue moon, I think is what he said, we'll throw something in there. And he was probably talking about Inland Empire. But every once in a while, they would throw something in there that would work and they would keep it. But yet everything was scripted. And he was just like, Cole, everything is scripted. I already talked kind of, how he does, is everything, like almost like, how he does as Gordon Cole in Twin Peaks, it was everything is scripted. Everything we do it's all scripted, So now I'm watching all this stuff about Lynchian, and what I'm coming to believe is that this is all prepared work. So he goes somewhere when he's writing. They say, everyone says this is a meditation, like there's some kind of transcendental meditation, and he finds this stuff that he writes from some odd, or not so odd, but some strange dreamlike place that he finds inside. He talks about this limitless well of creativity where he imagines and he goes and meditates, and then it comes over him, and almost like a dream, he starts to write it. And what I think of a lot is poets like W.B. Yeats, who talked about some mystical kind of thing that would come over him and his wife. W.B. Yeats' wife was also a writer, and they would somehow just start writing this stuff, one of our greatest poets. Now, recently, I've been doing research on Cormac McCarthy, and it seems like there's something similar, because they ask him about, well, where do you get some of these ideas? And his writing kind of goes off into this like non-grammar kind of almost stream of consciousness way of speaking, and he feels the same thing, but he talks about the unconscious. So this is what I'm finding about Cormac McCarthy, who wrote No Country for Old Men, and recently he wrote The Passenger, is writing a sequel to that. But he's talking about this unconsciousness, or this unconscious place, like a dreamlike place that's from the imagination. But it's also from a deeper part of you. And what Lynch talks about is it's like an unconscious dreamlike well that you go into, that's those massive space where it's unlimited, it's beyond thought almost to a certain extent, and then it invades you, and then you start to transcend, and then it comes out, and then it hits the paper, and that's where the design comes from. So it is prepared. It's not this improv thing. So now when I start to think about writing, which to me, and I have to admit, I don't always do this long kind of meditation thing, although sometimes my stories will come about as I'm waking up, and it'll stay with me, and then I find it later on throughout the day, because I'm working on a kind of a novella now, and sometimes I turn those into scripts. But what I'm realizing is now there is a feeling that comes about. It's not connected to meditation where I can control the feeling. It's not that way with me. Now I wish I could, and I might be able to, because meditation is very unique. It's a very unique way to access the creativity. But with me, it's a feeling that comes about, and it can come at any time. Maybe when I'm driving, maybe when I'm doing the dishes, maybe when I'm petting the cat, maybe when I'm having a conversation. And if I don't write it down at that moment, then I sometimes will forget it. So luckily, I'm able to use this thing that I have on my phone where I can just immediately just start writing. And the story that I'm working on right now, I have searched out online imagery. So I'll go, maybe I'll read a passage of something, or maybe I'll see an image, or maybe a movie, or maybe a photo or a painting, and then I grab that. It's almost like I'm fishing, as Lynch talks about catching the big fish. But it's images that I see, and it's all these different stuff. And the character that I'm writing about now is a comedian that's gone out in the world. He's going on this adventure, and these weird things start happening to him. He's like a famous stand-up comedian that goes out, and these weird things start happening, and these strange locations and all this stuff comes about, and he has to deal with these challenges. And he's taking with him his cat, so he's traveling with a kitty cat. So all these things are happening to him, and it goes on and on and on, and I'm posting it and reposting it on Facebook. So what I'm actually doing is taking the original post, erasing it, and then reposting the other, the add-on. So when you go back to read it, it's going to be longer. It's like a long thread. I don't worry about chapters and things like that, but it's a long thread. So the idea just continues, and then I go forward. So I'm exploring a different way of writing where it's more based on feeling, and the creativity comes from feeling, and not something that's planned out meticulously, but I do think about the words, and I do think about the structure of how the story unfolds. Just like Eraserhead, when you go and read Eraserhead, there's a structure there. There's a plot, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's characters. And a lot of people think Eraserhead isn't as weird or strange as what people, I try to use the word strange with Lynch, and weird with, Weird Al Yankovic, so there's Lynch that's strange, and then there's weird, which is more kind of comedy or funny. With Lynch, it's not funny as much as it's strange, but yet absurd, right? But surreal. With other movies, things are funny, but I think Lynch is kind of humorous, kind of how Samuel Beckett may have been humorous, or how other artists sometimes are humorous with absurdity and things like that. But not all of those absurd. I mean, some people say that Lynch is not necessarily absurd, that he's surreal. But I think there's absurdity in there as well as being surreal, as in dreamlike. Coming from the surreality or surreal, or I'm trying to think of the right word. Surreal, I guess, is what it comes from. But anyway, I just wanted to say that because I just saw this thing on Lynch, and I think he's an interesting character, and this would probably be something, maybe Cole on David Lynch or something, since I met him and everything. But when I'm saying that he's the strangest person I've ever met, I'm not saying it in an insulting way. The reason I'm saying it is because I pictured him probably being strange in behavior. But a lot of people are saying, he's just a normal person. I'm sure he has normal moments. And so he's just normal, everyday Joe, not that strange. But to me, it seems like when I meet somebody, I look for, when I meet anybody, I always look for behavior that I can associate with and say, okay, yeah, I do that, or I may think that, like a commonality, not with Lynch. To me, it was all a mysterious thing. And it may have been because he just showed me Inland Empire. But to me, it was all mystery. Even the hand gesturing and the way the speaking was and all of that was all a mystery to me. And it was something I had to study and understand. Now, I'm sure there's other people too. I think also Ben Kingsley, when I met Ben Kingsley in New York, it was also that kind of thing. And even Sir Ian McKellen, it was something that I had not seen before. The behavior was new to me. Like I can see other people and I can say, this is strange or this is unique. But Lynch he's unique and he's strange. It's not a bad thing. But that is probably why his movies are so mysterious, is because his behavior is not like other people's behavior. I'm not saying that he doesn't think like other people, but what I'm saying is that his behavior is more unique and eccentric, just as his movies are. Because when I see someone's movie, I usually think that's kind of their behavior in a way. And a lot of times it mimics their personality and their way of thought. And one thing I would like to say is also another one, he did Rabbits. And that is very surreal and very funny. But no filmmaker in Hollywood today can even come close to making something like that and still it be funny or humorous and then strange. And where is it coming from? Now, there are some European filmmakers that may, like Fellini, for example, and some other filmmakers that have been able, maybe Bergman, maybe a little bit, Ingmar Bergman, and Fellini, where they have been able to make a movie where you're basically not necessarily lost, but that you're carried through the film and you enter into what's known as a new experience, right? What makes me mad about Hollywood today and about where cinema has come is when you see a movie, it's no longer a new experience. It's just a regurgitated experience. It's an experience that's already been made in a different format with different actors. And you're like, where's the originality? For example, if you think about Ronnie Rocket, there's nothing like that ever in which Lynch has created. It's completely new. You also have to realize, too, that most filmmakers that are probably like that today would not be accepted. Because the money risk would be so great. With Hollywood, they're more like a bank, and they're banking on making sure that film is going to make money, not whether it's going to be like an art house film or something original. And that's sad. It's a sad situation. But I am looking forward to seeing Fabelmans, which Spielberg did get to use Lynch to play John Ford, because I feel that also Lynch brings about acting in a new way that maybe Brando also has brought, because people are so hell-bent in mimicking the Marlon Brando method kind of style that something like Lynch's style of acting and even what he uses in his movies would be foreign and maybe criticized, when actually, to be honest, in aspects, his acting and many of his actors are even more real than a lot of what we see in modern day film, because of their eccentric behavior and the reality of like maybe the things they do, right? Even though they're absurd, it still brings in a truth because of the conscious or the dreamlike state that people reveal in what movies are. Meaning the acting is in line or jibes with the surreal aspect of the writer and the filmmaker in that world that they have created. So it matches what the director wants. Thus, it becomes very, very real. And that's another thing about Brando, too, is he was always fitting into what the story needed to be done, even though he was very rebellious in his choice of what he wanted to do. I think Brando and Lynch probably would have hit it off, although Brando, was in a different realm, of Hollywood, and probably never would have been able to really work with him, because at the time he just wasn't, they weren't on the same what I'm trying to say is they weren't really on the same, in the same universe, you could say. Meaning, Brando was doing films like The Score with Robert De Niro and things like that, where Lynch was more just trying to, tell his story in his way. So he was using actors that were not as famous, iconic. I think he doesn't always do that. Though he has used Nicolas Cage, who wasn't as iconic as he is now, and Dennis Hopper, who was very iconic, but also brought in the Lynchian experience. And when I'm thinking, or when I think about acting, is that since I've seen so many Lynch movies and stuff, is I don't think that realism is necessarily something that would be talked about, like maybe on set. You would talk about the story if you were directing or something, because realism is in the eye of the beholder, not in what we think would be real. Because remember, movies all in all are a dream experience, whether we like it or not. They are. They are like a dream experience. No matter how real the director wants to be, they will always be not real, because you're looking at a two-dimensional screen and you can't touch the actor, you can't shake the actor's hand or anything because they're not really there. So really, to be honest, he's probably more real, meaning Lynch is probably more real than, a lot of other film directors. And there's a lot of good ones out there. Now, you've got the Coen brothers, you got Fincher, you've got, there in R2, you've got a lot of great directors out there today that are shooting for something that they think maybe be real to them. And that's the most important thing, is that the movie be real to the storyteller. And another thing I heard, one last thing about David Lynch too, is that usually he writes his movies and his stories for himself. So it's something that he wants to see. And since he's true to himself and he wants to see it, and he's making it for himself, we find that very interesting. So anyway, you have a good night, and welcome to the Please Subscribe Show.